Hello, this is MC Squared.
And the Otaku Jock.
And we just got back. We finally got around to seeing X-Men Apocalypse. I've been hearing pretty so-so things on this film going in. Some people liked it, some people really hated it. Personal opinion, this movie was okay. I mean,
a big bag of okay, I think is the best way to describe it. If this wasn't a great movie, but this wasn't a terrible movie by any stretch of the imagination.
It didn't suck, but it wasn't a wow factor like Days of Future Past was either.
No, and I definitely think that, maybe some of what has been said about the movie might be overstating how bad it is, but I can definitely see that there are some things about this movie that definitely don't work for us.
But there are some things that do work. For instance, I like how the X-Men film trilogy, series, is starting to finally ease its way into actually resembling its comic book form.
Yes, I mean, for those who remember at the very beginning of this, back when Bryan Singer did the original X-Men movie was it 2001?
No, it was 2000.
2000, all right. I was in the ballpark. I mean, everyone had, the dark black latex outfits. You had the line from Wolverine not Wolverine, from Cyclops, quipping, would you rather want to have
yellow spandex?
Yellow spandex. But as the series has progressed, these characters have started to look more and more like the characters that we have known for so long. I mean, First Class, I think it was very. It looked
First Class was very 60s X-Men.
Definitely, and you can see the influence of that sort of the comic book style starting to make its way in, probably right around that point.
Exactly, because there were the X-Men uniforms themselves, and it was just like that's Stan Lee and Jack Kirby all over.
Absolutely.
And then Magneto is in full Magneto garb at the end, looking more like Magneto than Ian McKellen had at the time, and it's just like, bam, yes.
And and then of course this movie right here, everyone once they get, I think the problem is
Psylocke looked like she jumped right off the pages.
Psylocke definitely. Magneto, I think, had a pretty good costume himself.
But his Magneto's look was kind of it seemed like the transition between what he had done previously and at the end of First Class and during Days of Future Past, and getting closer to where Ian McKellen was with the muted tones and.
Yeah, I could see that. And just overall, and Apocalypse, not a bad villain, but I think that we've seen better.
I mean, he was portrayed well. Oscar Isaac, Poe Dameron from The Force Awakens did a good job playing. He put almost a sadness to him. Something about the look in his eyes, and it was a good performance. What I think could have been better is I think he could have digitally manipulated him to look a little larger, because Apocalypse should be like this big, imposing figure. I mean, he's a shapeshifter, and he really doesn't do any sort of size changing, except in, when Xavier is inside his head at the end.
At the very end of the movie. And again, our usual spoiler warning pretty much comes into play right here. I mean, we're going to talk about things about the movie. If you haven't gone to see it and you still want to go see it, and I would say, still go see this movie. But we're going to
keep an open mind.
We're going to be talking about a few things about this. Okay. So, let's start talking about some of the stuff that didn't work. What's something that didn't work for you?
I've said this with almost every X-Men movie that has come out for the past 10 years. The timeline is irreparably fucked. Even with time travel, fixing some things, and at the end of Days of Future Past, it's still messed up.
There's really no debating about it. I even was talking about it with someone on Facebook the other night, and I'm just basically like, the X-Men movie timeline is so screwed up.
Timelines. Let's be clear about that, because true. Some people have made the argument that discrepancies in the previous films, those movies don't count anymore because now we have a new timeline. No, that's not how it works, because even without the timeline change, the discrepancies in the original timeline were still discrepancies. And just saying, "Oh, they don't count," that's like saying, "All right, so half my movie collection of these films is worthless."
I mean, why would you want to get those if you can't go watch half the movies anymore without them mattering?
And I still even the sucky ones like X-Men Origins. I mean, yeah, it was bad, but so many people like to write that off as, "Oh, that was never canon to begin with." Now, show me an official statement from Fox that says that, and we'll talk about that. And the excuse that it was bad, so it didn't count. Or there were too many contradictions in it for it to count. It's a lot like what James Rolfe said in his Chronologically Confused about the Zelda Timeline games. If you're just discrediting something because you don't think it fits, that's nothing but an excuse not to think.
That's true, and of course, later on Nintendo did release the official timeline. But I think another thing that definitely...
I mean, I could do a whole video, like, sort of deconstructing how the whole timelines is a mess in these films. But even then, I still, even with two different timelines, I still, have in my head a sort of chronological viewing order, which would be X-Men First Class, because obviously that's the earliest, 1960s.
Right.
Love it or hate it, X-Men Origins, Wolverine, that's
I think
set in the 80s.
Now, to be fair, I think that a lot of people look at Origins badly, and not for bad reasons.
Deadpool.
That movie was just an absolute mess, and the writer's strike did it no favors back in 2000.
Yes, the writer's strike.
Let's at least give it that much.
Though it had a good start. With the whole, pre-credit sequence and even credit sequence.
It did. You're right about that.
Not saying much.
What else? What else for your?
And then after X-Men Origins Wolverine, you would get into the trilogy, of course. X-Men,
the original
X2, and X-Men: The Last Stand, which of course left a weird taste in people's mouths.
A lot of people say take it or leave it.
Take it or leave it.
A lot of people don't like it.
Yeah. And then it would go into the Wolverine, and then Days of Future Past, which rewrites events that we've just gone over. I don't know if we're talking didn't happen at all or just happened differently. I always like to imagine that they happened differently than we saw before.
That's true.
So The Last Stand now gets a happy ending, and years prior to that, we now have X-Men Apocalypse. Deadpool can go anywhere after the time fix-up.
Yeah, I think so. You bring up Deadpool, I think one of the things that I definitely thought was very lacking in this movie in particular were the action sequences. They weren't bad action sequences, like they weren't Batman v Superman goddamn incomprehensible action sequences. Yeah, we're still harping on that, so what? We're not bitter or anything, are we? But they were, I would say, solid but unspectacular.
They didn't have exactly the wow factor of Days of Future Past,
or even the wow factor of
Deadpool,
of Civil War,
or of Civil War, exactly.
But then again, at the same time, I think that it'll eventually be one of those things that very few movies can call themselves Civil War. Let's be fair about that. I think something that I personally kind of had an issue with in this movie is that it really liked to jump around a lot.
Yeah,
it really felt.
I don't think it was as bad as Batman v Superman, because
definitely not.
Because the jumping around in this was at least comprehensible.
It was. You're right about that, but it was still something that's just like you're here for a few minutes, then you're here for a few minutes, then you're here for a few minutes. Then you're here for a few minutes. One
part I found, sort of made me go, was that we see Mystique gets in contact with Nightcrawler, and they're sort of like on the run, blah blah blah, and then we get like 10 story scenes, and then when Apocalypse is making his presence known, we jump back to the two of them as if they're still, that's still that same evening.
It just feels like
shouldn't you have placed this scene a little later in the film?
You would have hoped that would have been the case, but yeah, I mean, at the very least, every single one of those transitions, it was made perfectly clear that we were looking at different parts of the story, be it the set design, the lighting, very clearly with the cast of characters that was in there. Mm-hmm. There was just no two ways about it. We could tell when they transitioned. I just think that they lost a chance to really develop a lot of the characters in this. Not to say that they were poorly developed, but it definitely felt like that maybe it was somewhat lacking. Not terribly so, but it did kind of it was something that I thought about when I was watching this movie.
Mm. I'm glad that they finally established that Cyclops and Havoc are brothers in this, as in the comics. What I find silly is that, Havoc was a teenager in First Class, and this is like 20 years later, and his brother is a teenager. Is he? How much older than his brother is he?
He looked like Sam Winchester, for goodness sakes. Almost like an immortal. It looked like, because I mean, if he was a teenager in First Class, he should at least be in his 30s for this one. But it didn't look like it.
I know.
I mean, that could just be the creative casting, but who knows?
I mean, because there's always been casting discrepancies when it comes to jumping around through the years in this. Like, because in X-Men Origins Wolverine and at the beginning of The Last Stand, Patrick Stewart is Professor X. And that's the 80s, both of those, when this film is taking place.
So,
and William Stryker in Origins was a much older guy than is in these new films.
Very true. Very true. But still, that was another thing. What was another thing that didn't work for me? It felt like that there were a lot of superfluous scenes.
Such as?
I think, and I know maybe some people might get on my case for this one, the Weapon X cameo.
Yes. Oh my.
Not that I'm not happy to see Hugh Jackman get another go at Wolverine, but it really felt like that Weapon X cameo was really shoehorned in.
The whole problem is that whole alkali base sequence was in the movie just to have that cameo. You could have excised that whole subplot, and it wouldn't have changed anything in the overall.
My only argument with that is that they would have had to find a different way to transport themselves.
Simple solution. Don't write that the jet was destroyed on the base.
Perhaps.
Just don't write it that way.
Perhaps. But no, I mean, it just felt as though that was a scene. You want to also talk about another scene that I felt could have been maybe put as a deleted scene later on the DVD. There's a sequence when Nightcrawler, Scott, Jean, and Jubilee are mall hopping.
Yeah, there's a scene in the commercials where Nightcrawler gets brain freeze, and I liked that in the commercials because it feels like he is just he's doing Nightcrawler from X-Men Evolution, and that was a good interpretation of Nightcrawler.
I can agree with you there. And then they all come out of that movie. They're coming out of Return of the Jedi because it's 1983. And then you have both Jubilee and Scott discussing, Star Wars or Empire. And then at the very end of that, Jean comes out and says, there's one thing that we can all know, that the third movies of these things suck. And I'm just
which is a jab at The Last Stand, of course. But of course,
the framing device of them having just come out of Return of the Jedi, that's... but then again, I can at least understand, 1983... probably a lot of people didn't necessarily like Return of the Jedi as much as they like Star Wars or Empire.
Well, we listen to Rebel Force Radio, and Jimmy Mack and Jason Swank have described, because these are older fans than we are, Star Wars.
These are guys that were essentially like 10, 11, 12 years old when it really began for them.
And they've relayed that, in the course of, Star Wars being new, Empire is often regarded as, a weak installment at the time, because it was so different from the first film, and blah, blah, blah. And for a long time, people regarded Star Wars and Return of the Jedi as the better ones. It wasn't until they started rewatching the movies over and over and over throughout the 90s and all that people began to regard Empire as the better movie.
Okay, so I'll at least give you a credit on that.
So that felt like sort of a bit of revisionist history, that little scene.
It does kind of feel that way, and which is surprising because Simon Kinberg was the guy who wrote the screenplay for this, and he has a history with Star Wars. I think mainly with writing episodes of Clone Wars. So I'm a little bit surprised that someone who is as familiar with the franchise as he is would throw something like that on in. But we're getting a little bit off topic.
Bit off topic.
But then again, you know what? The Star Wars stuff is how we kind of came to grow this channel in the first place. So we have to.
And speaking of the whole mall hopping kind of thing, Jubilee's in this movie.
Very limitedly,
which isn't a problem, except that, this is still the timeline being fucked up. Jubilee was a student during X2, identified by name even. Alright, I'm just like...
Do you think that it would have...
No amount of time travel can change when a person was born, unless we're talking about a time-traveling pregnant woman.
Here's actually a fan question that I want to ask you. Do you think it would have worked better if maybe if it had been Jubilee instead of Negasonic, Teenage Warhead, and Deadpool?
It would have had a more familiar edge to it.
True. Then again, I thought it was Boom Boom that was Negasonic
right.
and Deadpool initially, looking at the commercials,
at the trailers and stuff.
Yeah, but that's neither here nor there. And I think that another thing that I also dislike about I'll be honest when I say that X-Men it definitely has its place in basically the history of comic books, but it's always something. The side of Magneto, and I've heard so many people trying to categorize themselves as followers of Magneto, saying that, hey, Magneto was right and everything. Certain people have said that. I'm not gonna bring anyone to the forefront on this, but I always look at that, and I think this movie may have painted that picture more than ever. That Magneto is in such a state after a certain event in this movie that he's willing to...
A very tragic
death.
That was sad.
A very tragic event, to be sure, but at the same time, you're going to burn it all to... He's willing to go with this person who is basically going to burn it all to the ground, basically Ra's al Ghul style. That's what it feels like, honestly.
The Ra's al Ghul is basically wipe out humanity and start over.
Well, yeah, but that was kind of what Apocalypse was doing as well.
No, but Apocalypse is more survival of the fittest.
Well,
only the strongest shall survive.
Well, both of them are kind of similar libertarian philosophies, which I don't necessarily agree with. It's just something that it's just like you're willing to burn it all to the ground, even though you know that there are people out there that would not wish ill on anyone. And I think that that's also something. Probably because I think
it's a lot of Apocalypse's manipulation going on.
Probably, but again, it was something that weighed on my mind because I've been seeing it happen a ton more online, especially in the last few weeks or so. I'm not going to go into details as to where it goes because I don't want to open myself up to anything, even though I think I already am. It's just something that's weighed on me that I don't subscribe to the philosophy of one person is bad, everyone in that group or belief system is bad. I don't believe that.
Because one thing to keep in mind in the comics, Magneto was the X-Men leader for quite a while.
That's true. I do remember that, but then again, they have not brought that into...
No, they haven't.
They have not brought that into the movie, and I'm looking at the movie just as its own thing.
As its own thing, okay.
As its own thing. And I do realize that, yes, there is the great tragedy of the fact that, that both Eric and Xavier, they're former friends.
Mm-hmm.
They both believed in this, and then
they're still sort of friends.
Sort of, yes.
They just acknowledge that they can't walk the same path.
Exactly, but again, it's also. So I guess that maybe I was getting flashes to certain flare ups online on various sites that I'm just like. This is a philosophy that I've seen some people employ. Definitely not to the scale that Magneto was, but it does kind of call to it that, and it's just a philosophy that I can't believe in. It's like I don't like taking sides in certain.
You're either with us or you're against us.
Exactly. That's I can't do that.
There has to be a middle ground.
Right, and I am certainly a part of that middle ground because. I'm going to go ahead and say this right now, and I apologize, but the whole dust-ups between SJWs and anti-SJWs, I want nothing of it. Yeah, I want nothing to do with either side, and I'll even say the same thing for Gamergate. Because, and I know that...
Please don't let this open up any floodgates.
Please. Yeah, I mean, and it's seriously something like, look... If you are willing to talk in a mature state, I'm willing to listen. But I don't want it to become a big thing. I mean, and even then, we've seen how that kind of thing, turns out. Like what happened to James Rolfe when he came out with his Ghostbusters video recently.
My God!
That's the big one that I was considering, but. That's the kind of thing that I've been putting so much thought, mainly because I've been traveling a lot recently. I've been on the road for like hours at a time, and you get the hum of the tires, and you're going up and down highways at about 60, 65 miles an hour. You tend to just sit there and think about things, and it's certainly something that has always weighed on me, and it's just something that. I'm just a person that believes that, hey, you know what? Let's have a conversation. Let's have a conversation. Let's not. I mean, I feel like that I'm a lot like Xavier. I feel like that there are good people out there in this world, regardless of what side there are. I might be someone whose politics may not differ from someone, but I'm not going to say that the person who's doing that is necessarily a bad person. I just think that it's. I guess that maybe just all I'm saying is that I look to try to have maybe a higher level of discourse online, and I know that that's probably asking for too much, but it's just something that kind of it was something that's been in my head, and this movie kind of brought those thoughts out, and it was certainly something that I was thinking about throughout the runtime. And speaking of that, I mean, the runtime it felt a little
long, yeah.
It definitely felt like certain parts really dragged, and the end might have been, but it wasn't like, say, Transformers 2. The end dragged out, because you want to talk about an example of an end being dragged out. That's a number one.
And both were in Egypt.
Yeah, so yeah, not to say anything about that, but yeah, the movie felt a little long. But overall, though, I don't think it was a terrible movie. Certainly wasn't a great movie. It was just like, hey, you know what, 2.5, 3 stars. 2.5, 3 stars. It's something.
Got our X-Men fix.
Exactly. You want to go see it, go see it. If you're on the fence about it, I still say go see it. Maybe find like go to a matinee or something, go to a cheaper showing, whatever. Just go ahead and go see it. I don't think it's as bad as people have made it out to be, but I also definitely see a lot of the problems that I think some of the folks make for this movie.
Should we talk about the tag at the end?
We can go ahead and talk about the tag.
Spoilers.
Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert.
So after the events at Alkali Lake, businessmen are collecting, blood samples of Weapon X, aka Wolverine, and X-rays and blah 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 blah. And we see on a suitcase that these people are part of the Essex Corporation. The clue being that Nathaniel Essex is Mr. Sinister.
So that could be a bit of a setting up for the next movie, which we should point out is already the next full-on X-Men movie is I think in pre-production stages at the moment, and it has already been announced that movie is going to take place in the 90s.
Which sounds appropriate.
Sounds appropriate.
We've gone from 60s to 70s to 80s to 90s. Are we going to come full circle?
I think so. Considering that I think Hugh Jackman is set to go for Wolverine one last time in the third movie as Old Man Logan.
Old Man Logan.
Who knows? I think that there's a lot to. I think that there's still some X-Men left in the tank, but I don't know. I think
because if they go full circle, it would you think it would take place after the revised Last Stand ending, where you've got Cyclops and Jean Grey and Wolverine and Storm and Beast and Iceman and Colossus and Rogue and all those guys. That'll be a hard thing to pull off.
That would, especially at this time. There's no two ways about that. But yeah, overall, it's not a movie. It's not. I still think. Yeah, it's honestly. I also still think that it's kind of a disappointment that these characters are locked down to 20th Century Fox.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not because, okay, maybe it's because
they've done some great stuff with it. They've done some bad stuff with it.
I'm not saying that I'm not saying this as a Marvel Studios / Disney fanboy. I'm saying this as someone who has watched a lot of these movies that are produced by a lot of these Marvel movies produced by the different companies. Spider-Man. Let's be fair about this. You had two great movies by Sam Raimi. You had a
mediocre
mixed bag with number 3. Mixed bag with number 3, though. I think a lot of people might be starting to look at that with a little bit of a brighter lens nowadays. And then, of course, you had the Amazing series, which everyone wants to forget.
I hated, like I said last time, I hated Amazing 1. I kind of liked Amazing 2. Not saying that I thought it was great or anything. More along the lines of this film. Maybe a little less than this film.
Yeah, and I think I think even the biggest critics of the Amazing series will, at the very least, admit that Amazing 2 was better than the first Amazing Spider-Man.
I've heard the opposite.
You've heard the opposite?
I've heard people really rail into Amazing 2.
Well, I think that, again, it was another case that, Sony thought that they could... Sony basically thought that they could make a Spider-Man movie on the cheap, and it basically blew up in their face. Especially after... again, that's always something that I'll remember. When we were walking out of the original Amazing Spider-Man movie... First thing that came out of my mouth was, they rebooted the Sam Raimi movies for this? And it's, and I'm trying not to bring up the MCU if at all possible, just because I feel so that it's not fair to really compare this movie with those movies.
Because they're very different films when you compare them.
They're very, very different films. And I think a lot, and it's not to say, and again, I've always said, and I even said this during our Batman v Superman video, and I think a lot in the comments. I am not against an overall darker tone with stories in media, and I think that.
But it needs to fit the media.
It needs to fit, and
Batman, you can do dark as shit. Superman, not so much.
Not so much, or at the very least, you have to be very, very good at it. And I'm sorry, David Goyer and Zack Snyder were not the right fit for that. But yeah, but I always kind of reject the notion of these stories that are dark for dark's sake.
Yeah.
Because, and probably one example that I can bring up is from the folks at Rooster Teeth, Ruby Season 3. Ruby Season 3, I feel, and again, I know that was much more a transitional season because of Monty's sudden and unexpected passing. But you go watch that entire season. It starts one way, it ends another, and I don't feel as though that the Empire Defense works for something like that. I have heard people compare the end of Season 3 of Ruby to the end of Fellowship of the Ring, which at the very least makes me hopeful that Season 4 will rebound. But again, we're kind of left on this, left on really what is a sour note, I think, in a lot of, I know that there are some folks out there that liked how that season went, but I was one that was like, you know what, if it had been framed better, I probably wouldn't have as much problem with it. And I think that kind of also goes for X-Men as well. I think that X-Men is one where you can have sort of like it's sort of like this dark existence to begin with, because it is dealing with something that's kind of serious, and it's like something that we've all had to deal, that most of us have had to deal with at one point: bullying, being outcast, being different for who you are. And that's been something about X-Men pretty much since the beginning.
Since the beginning, yeah.
So it's nothing that, I mean, X-Men is one of those series where I think that a darker tone can definitely work. And to be fair, I think that they have done it pretty well in certain areas. But at the same time, you also have to remember, you can't leave things so dark that you're just literally just wanting to just run out and just look for some sunshine.
Right.
I mean, I think that's my biggest thing, is that this is one where I feel as though it was a good mix of fun and dark.
Yeah.
There's some tragedy in there, but but it's a good structure around the tragedy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, two scenes you go see the movies, two scenes in particular, you'll see what I mean.
Mm.
I think that they at least handled those as well. I mean, they one of them could be considered a refrigerator moment, but at the same time, it's also like, you know what, X-Men has always been one of these where it's just like, yeah, that kind of stuff is almost to be expected.
Yeah. Quicksilver.
Yes. On a lighter note.
Good music choice for his little Mark II escapade.
Mark II escapade. I still think that the sequence from Days of Future Past was better, but this was also pretty cool.
Like I say, I like the music choice of that one.
And I get
dreams are made. What I found.
Careful, you're going to get us content ID'd.
Oh no! I didn't finish a sentence. What I found, kind of laughable is that when he's introduced in the film, he is right back where we left him in Days of Future Past. It is 10 years later, and he is still in the 70s. He is still playing a Ms. Pac-Man machine in a basement. I mean, yeah, that can happen in a person's life, but when you see that on film,
it's very jarring.
It's just especially like it's 10 years later.
Exactly. Yeah, the 10 years later, and to be fair, he doesn't look all that different in 10 years
exactly.
as well.
And none of the characters do.
No, they don't.
Even the characters that were introduced in the 60s in First Class don't look a day older.
No, the main characters. You're absolutely right. I mean, Nicholas Hoult. I mean, Beast.
Havoc.
Fassbender as Magneto.
McAvoy
as Xavier.
Moira.
Well,
I mean, she's got a different haircut.
She's got a different haircut.
But so does Havoc.
Right, but at the very least, we can at least excuse
Mystique, because she can make herself look like anything.
Exactly, and again, I think Jennifer Lawrence also did another fine job with that. I think that worked out very well for her.
Using her Mystique appearance as little as possible.
Yeah, that's very true.
And I find it weird, she becomes an X-Man at the end. I'm just like, so in this new timeline, how did the events of the first two film go down exactly if she's an X-Man?
I don't know. Maybe we'll see something in the next movie.
But at least we finally see her in the Mystique outfit.
That's true.
Because for as long as these movies have existed, I think a lot of newcomers to the series might have been fooled into thinking that, oh, Mystique has always been naked. No.
No, I mean, you even go that. I mean, again, probably my biggest exposures to X-Men prior to the movies would be both the original Fox TV show and the Evolution series that aired on WB. Yeah, I mean, isn't that weird? Isn't that weird that, an X-Men show ran on WB? Like, I don't think that, I mean, we didn't question it at the time, but now you look back in retrospect, just like, how did that happen?
And you bring up how you weren't really familiar with X-Men back then at the time. I think this is a good time to announce something that we've been talking of doing. It started recently with our reviews of Batman v Superman and Captain America Civil War that, he's pretty unfamiliar with comics.
I am.
And so I thought to myself, well, wouldn't it be great if we formed a sort of little comic book club? Not like a book club, but our reading comics assignments are for comics.
Exactly.
And I've been compiling reading lists for like Superman and Batman and Teen Titans and Spider-Man and X-Men, long, comprehensive reading lists. And then I got to thinking, well, what if it was more than a book club? What if we discussed these as a podcast?
Now, to be fair, I was the one who thought maybe about.
Yes, you did. You dropped the podcast.
I dropped the idea of, and to be fair, I have been someone who's been sort of considering the whole ideas for doing a podcast for years now, because I mean, like I said, when I'm on the road a lot, I love listening to podcasts. I love downloading shows that are sort of off the beaten path. Now, I don't listen to comic book podcasts, but I listen to various things. Like, one of my favorite podcasts is Anime World Order, the anime discussion podcast. Others that I enjoy, I listen to Rooster Teeth's official podcast, which they do
Rebel
weekly.
Force Radio.
Rebel Force Radio is one that I listen to. For a daily fix, I listen to Buzz Burbank News and Comment. Buzz Burbank, a former radio personality here in the Washington D.C. area, does his own little 15-minute news of the day digestible, which you just pop on and you just listen to. It's something real nice if you want to just kill a quick 15 minutes. But it is something that we've definitely discussed for a number of years, and we feel like that we want to do it.
Because this will be great for people who themselves are a little unfamiliar with comics, and I think it's a good educational thing for him, because, like, as an example, that Jean Grey as the Phoenix died in the late 70s, but, Jean Grey was also around in the 80s helping form X Factor. Did you ever wonder how that happened?
There you go. Oh, and I think and I think probably the best example that I can give you, the Superman and Batman things. What on earth happened during the lead-ups and the follow-ups to those two big events from the 90s?
You're talking about Death of Superman and Nightfall.
Correct.
Uh-huh.
So it's certainly something that I'm looking forward to learn about.
Wait until you actually see Superman kill General Zod with kryptonite. A lot of Man of Steel defenders have used that as like, he's killed in the comics before. Just because it happened like one time or maybe two times by different writers, that doesn't mean it was a good story.
No, it doesn't.
That doesn't mean it was an accurate representation of what he should be, just because it happened by some chance by a writer.
And I think that this also goes well to sort of like, we still have events going on right now. I mean, of course, probably the two big things that are going on in comics right now, you have DC with Rebirth. Which, I read issue 1 of that. I thought that, or was it issue 1 or issue 0?
It was the debut issue.
The debut issue of Rebirth. I actually like what they're doing. I really do.
By
think so.
using Dr. Manhattan as
I think that in and of itself was a nice little twist. That, I mean, again, I do kind of feel bad for Alan Moore, because this is going to be another piece of
if Alan Moore has heard about this, he just probably would just went.
he probably did, but. No, and then of course on the Marvel side you have Civil War 2, which I read in the comic book shop not that long ago, and I think while maybe it depends on where the series decides to go, but I'm definitely intrigued after reading the first issue. I think that so many people are ready to rake Brian Michael Bendis over the coals for pretty much anything, but I also think that that's one of the, again, that kind of goes to what I was talking about earlier about how online culture has really sort of really started to become almost poisonous in the last few years.
Yeah,
but
to be fair, it's not exactly new.
No.
Back in the early '80s, when the Teen Titans Judas contract occurred, Marv Wolfman and George Perez actually got death threats of, "I can't believe what you did to Tara! I'm gonna fucking kill you!" Blah, 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 blah. Tara's fate was planned from the start.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I mean, and you don't think that the plans for Civil War 2 haven't been, basically gone over from the beginning? Yeah, I mean, let's just be fair about this. I wanna at least see what Bendis and company have in store for the rest of this. I think that while I understand there are some people who are trepidatious about this, especially given the fact that one character winds up dead and another winds up near death.
Who?
I won't go into who that is, but you know what? If you're anything of a comics follower, you probably already know who we're talking about. It's just something that I look at and I'm just like, you know what? There's part of the reason I feel as though that maybe comics have quote unquote stagnated is because the fans aren't allowing them to really kind of grow, and I'm talking about superhero comics in particular. Mm-hmm. The fans don't allow major changes without serious backlash, and while I understand where the backlash comes,
it goes a lot to the "I don't want change" clip.
It does. We're not going to play that here just because it's like we've run it several times. I mean, granted, there are changes that do kind of suck. Like looking at what Marvel has done recently. Less said the better. Which, God, I really want to know who on earth gave the okay for that. Because, I mean, especially to have that... Alright, I'm just going to say this. To have that twist happen so soon after Civil War just completely dominated the box office...
And who
was asleep at the wheel at Marvel?
And that happened the same damn day that Rebirth launched. And I'm just like, how did two comic companies, just do a complete 180 on each other on the coolness scale in one day?
Amazing. Truly amazing. But no, we're planning on this, and we're not going to be exclusive to comic books.
We're not.
When it comes to the podcast.
Yeah, this is news to me.
well, I also think that we should also leave some stuff open for some other conversations. Like we could have like regular comic book review episodes, but then we also have reviews of other things as well.
Such as?
Well, I mean, I was thinking maybe some, some TV reviews, some cartoon reviews, perhaps. I mean, it's an idea, if nothing else. Again, we're still kind of in the beta phase of planning things out.
If you think this is a good idea, let us know. We'll be beginners at the podcasting scene, so
Obviously.
don't expect good quality from us at first.
Well, quality is subjective. Let's be fair about that. I mean,
we'll probably put viewable episodes of it on the channel here.
We'll definitely we will definitely try our best to give you the best possible product. It just again, it's going to be a case of us learning how to do things. Like we're probably going to do a couple of test shows once we get our setups all together to see kind of how we do these things.
And
which is the important thing.
Our first foray, if we can get this started, we'll be introducing him to the John Byrne's Superman revamp of the 1980s, the Man of Steel.
The post-crisis origin.
The post-crisis origin of Superman.
And I think that's where a lot of our focus on DC in the coming years will probably be. Will be on post-crisis stuff.
Yeah, I mean, occasionally it might delve into some pre-crisis Batman, like Steve Englehart's run on DC Detective Comics, which is often referred to as Strange Apparitions, and those stories were actually had a strong influence in developing the first Tim Burton Batman film.
Well, we'll see what happens with that. I think that the great thing about having a podcast is that it gives us the freedom to do more discussions like this. And we know that there's an audience out there for this. I mean, yes, our Civil War video, hasn't gotten as many viewers as our Batman v Superman
I think that's probably because the Batman v Superman video was an easy target for viewing.
I think so. Not to mention as well, I mean, I'm not gonna lie. The Civil War video was pretty damn all over the place. Whereas our Batman v Superman video, we pretty much homed in on the targets straight away, and we kind of just went after them one after the other.
Right.
But but again, that was just one of the cases. It's probably just one of those cases that more people get entertainment out of seeing something being torn to shreds over something being praised to high heaven.
This is true as well.
So who knows? But we're probably going to get that started maybe in the coming weeks or months. We're hoping that we're going to be able to bring this to you as sort of a new thing that we want to do.
So, shall we wrap things up? Do we have anything more to say?
I'll go ahead. I'll say this. We've been to 4 superhero movies this year in 2016. Rankings for it as follows: Civil War, Deadpool, Apocalypse, Batman v Superman.
Yeah.
I think that that's kind of what it is, and it's not. And again, not to say that Apocalypse is a bad movie. It's okay.
It's
It's hard. It's harmless. It's basically a bag of chips at the end of a day.
Yeah.
I think that's the best way to do it. It isn't a full. It isn't like a fancy steak dinner the way that Civil War was by comparison.
And like I said, I'll probably work on doing a breakdown video of just how messed up the X-Men timelines are.
So, until the next time we meet, which who knows when that be, we might bring it. Plans that we might have coming up. We might do a vlog when the extended version of Batman v Superman.
Oh, please don't make me sit through that again.
I'm of the opinion that we should at the very least give it the chance that it deserves. Oh God, even as much as I would regret it. But no, other ones that we could consider planning. Might do one for Independence Day Resurgence.
I've got a feeling that movie is gonna flop.
Who knows? I'm willing to give it the benefit of the doubt because a lot of people always like to put Roland Emmerich and Michael Bay in the same sentence. I think that the thing you always have to remember about Roland Emmerich, at the very least, he knows how to, he's a much better overall director than Michael Bay is. At least when it comes to photographing these large scale destruction scenes, as we've seen through various means. But who knows? We do these things as we feel like it, and we've had a lot of fun doing it with the last few movies we've seen. So pretty much.
Why did we not do one for Deadpool?
I think because it didn't hit us. I think that we were, it was just one of those things that it never occurred to us. We should have done one. We should have done one for Deadpool.
Yeah.
Missed opportunity. What can we say? Still, though, we're having fun doing this, and that's the important thing.
So, adios.
So long.